Please give your undivided attention to the screen. We have a special guest today. Let me turn my speaker around so you can hear, and he should be able to hear you. Remember those really cool books you got last week?
Yeah.
This is the man behind those books. This is Russell Nohelty.
Thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. I hope you enjoyed them.
So why don't you tell us just real quick about yourself? I mean, we stalked you on your webpage. But
Sure.
give us
So,
like the-
so I'm a
Sorry.
USA Today best-selling author. I've written or edited all of the books behind me and a whole bunch more. I also run a company called Writer MBA, which helps writers make more money in their businesses. And through that, I've had a podcast, and I've drawn books, and I've basically done just about anything a creative human can do. I've made movies, so um, I've produced animation. I've pretty much done it a little bit of everything, and a lot of writing books and comics.
Very cool. Now, when did you get started?
I started in 2004, right out of college. I got a job doing live shots on Capitol Hill with senators and congressmen. And I quickly hated that. And after 6 months, I started making my own shorts and movies and moved into doing more like freelance production stuff. Made my first movie in 2007. And then I moved to LA in 2008 and never made another movie, but made a whole bunch of comics and other stuff since then.
Like, how did that happen? Like, why the shift?
So my manager at the time worked for the company that owned the rights to Halloween, and they had a Halloween comic, and they had a production deal with Devil's Due and a bunch of others. And one day I was in his office being like, we're not getting any meetings. Like, I cannot overstress how unsuccessful my Hollywood career has been in comparison to my book and publishing career. So we were getting no meetings. Still to this day, I don't get meetings. And he said, have you ever thought about doing comics? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, like, I used to read comics in the 90s, but like the Rob Liefeld, like big buff dude, like it just didn't do anything for me after a while. And so I kind of stopped reading comics, and he handed me a big pile of independent comics, and I fell in love, and I realized that they cost like 1,000th of what it costs to make a movie. And so I was like, this is what I'm doing now, and started doing one. And then I got a publishing deal for the one, and then we got a publishing deal for the second one, and just kind of started to spiral. During that time, I started writing novels as well. So just kind of overall took over my life slowly and surely over from like 2010 to when I started going full time in 2015.
So these guys, this is my junior class. They have been working all year on children's books, kind of in prep for going into the next level, which would be comics, because it's kind of like a children's book is maybe 1 or 2 drawings per page, whereas a comic tends to be like 4 to 15, 16,
Sure.
So what they've done is I had them look over your stuff and stalk your page a little bit and come up with things that they wanted to know, and I printed those out, and we can just kind of rapid fire what they want to know.
Sure.
So one of the ones that jumped out to me was like, how do you manage your time? And then as a part B to that, how long does it take you to make a comic?
Sure. So I write the comics. So it doesn't take me as long as it does to draw the comics. And like, that's one of the big revelations that I had when I first started, was like, oh, I don't have to draw these comics. I did draw 2 books, How Not to Invade Earth and Gherkin Boy, but they are very remedial art. And I would say for my artists, it takes somewhere between a day and 2 days to draw a page. Now, that very much depends on the style. So I tend to work in a more cartoonish style because it's cheaper and it takes less time for my artists to draw them. But I did do a book called Katrina Hates the Dead, and that artist now draws for Marvel, and it would take him a day to do pencils and then I would give it to an inker, and he would do inks, and it would take a day. So it was about like across the spectrum, the kind of more chibi animation, cartoonish books take about a day to go from regular to from nothing to a finished page, and like the more advanced pages can take a day or sometimes even a week. And that's why you see a lot of people. I had a person come to my table one time and he goes, "Look at this one panel right here. It's so bad looking." And I'm like, "Yeah, but any one panel doesn't matter. They probably," and I flipped the page, like they probably spent 3 days on this really nice page here. And in return, they had to cut corners someplace because they have about 5 weeks to do a whole book. So how I manage my time is I started with one thing, and I started mastery of one thing. I think when you start doing something, people get really excited to learn how to do every part of it at once. And if you've ever crashed a computer by opening too many programs, the same thing I think happens in your brain. So I learned how to write comics. Actually, I learned how to write movies and then direct movies and then edit movies and then write comics and then write novels. And I was very intentional at doing that one process until I had mastery in it. Because when you have mastery in something, you can just turn it on and off without even thinking about it. But if you try and put too many inputs in, it kind of fries the system and you don't get anything done. And I see that happen with students probably more often than anything else.
They wanted to know, how long was the process to get your first book done? And I would like to add your last book that you did.
Okay, so I worked on my first full book, was called Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, and it took 12 years. But the first volume, it took about 18 months. I would say that a full graphic novel comic, takes about a year and a half for me to put together. And that part hasn't really changed from the beginning to now, because I hire out. So I'm not the person that's drawing it. Each book has taken roughly 18 months to 2 years. Now, an artist will always say they can get it done in way less time, but what ends up happening is they burn out, they get another job that pays better, they hurt their hand because they draw too much, and all of those things have happened to me. They live in Argentina and they have a rolling brownout for like 2 years, and we just can't communicate for about 6 months at a time. And then I will be emailing somebody. Sometimes you email the wrong email address, which I was told by one of my artists one time. But it takes about, when we're rocking and rolling, like when an artist is working on your book, I would say we could get 10 pages done in a month. That's about the best I've ever done, which means that to do 90 pages would take 9 months. But that artist was doing 12 issues straight with me. So he worked with me for about 2.5 years, I think, to get all of Ichabod done. And when someone's doing that, when you're their main source of income, like that just changes the perception of how fast you can do things. When you're working as an independent, I've also had artists like that one who worked on Katrina Hates the Dead, who got a job on Dark Horse and then Marvel and was like, I can't work on your rate. You have to double my rate or I'm not even going to be able to do this. And I was like, well, you kind of got me over a barrel because we're in the middle of production. My last book and my first book, I guess my first book took about 18 months. My last book took 9 months. But also I have books that aren't done that have taken 5 years. And I have books that an artist came to me to write, and they haven't even produced one full page yet. And so it all kind of evens out with like what I'm working on. For a novel, I write a novel in 5 weeks. And that used to take me a year. And when it was my process, I wrote a novel. It took me about a year to write 40,000 words. And my last novel takes about 5 weeks to write 90,000 words and get it off to an editor. So it definitely that is the difference that mastery can give you and having a process can give you. It's just I don't have the same process with comics because I don't draw them.
I think something that has helped me is that first comic is always the hardest one to get done. Once you have all of your character designs, you have all of your story, you know where you're headed, then it seems like it moves a little bit quicker each time, just in general. And I would imagine writing, because you do a lot of novel series, you're not reinventing the world each time you do a new book.
Yeah, I would say that it's a lot easier to write when you're in a series and it's a long running series because the characters just speak to you a lot easier and you know exactly what those characters are doing. But also, when you're writing a book, while every series can be different, tonally, every series has to be generally self-contained in and of itself and have internal logic to it. Again, that logic can change series to series, or you can introduce things that change the logic. But in general, if, for instance, with Ichabod, roughly every 10 pages are broken up into half of the book is going to be character development and the second half is going to be monster fight, or vice versa. And I know that I'm like, oh, well, it's been 7 pages. I need to gear up for the monster fight. Or it's been 10 pages of monster fight. I need to gear up for a character design. With my series, Godsverse Chronicles, it's written in the Doc Samson action adventure vein, where it's like, okay, every 10,000 words, roughly, there needs to be a turn or a new sequence that starts that makes it make sense. But my book Obsidian Spindle Saga has a very different cadence to it, where and you can develop different things with different series. So one of the biggest problem with a long series is you burn out because you get bored writing the same thing or drawing the same thing over time, which is why I usually have 2 series that I'm working on at any one time when I'm in like a big production mode. And what I'll do is I'll finish one series and then my brain needs to recharge on that series. And so I write another piece of the other series. And by having those 2 things that work in tandem, it helps me not get bored with the tedium of writing 12 books or looking at 16 pages of comic or whatever.
I do that as well, because I work on Grace and I try to get through about a trade of Grace. By the time I'm done with that, I'm sick of it. And that's why we have the other Lectus Juke Joint. Then I can come back once that's done and Grace is completely recharged. So I think that's absolutely good advice to have some other stuff that you can work on, even if it's just, as an artist, just something some other style or something.
Yeah, when I think of Sarah Scribbles a lot. I don't know if anyone reads that web comic, but Sarah Scribbles is drawn by an artist who draws beautiful comics. Like, they are gorgeous. And Sarah Scribbles is just this kind of like very like low-key, low-brow art style, but being able to switch between them. When I first saw her first book, I was like, oh my God, this is the same person that does both of these books? This is incredible. I have artists that will do like an art book, a pinup book, as they're doing the other thing. And so yeah, I think you need to have styles, but it doesn't have to be like 2 comics. Maybe you're doing a kid's book and then you're doing a comic and you're writing like a visual novel, because a lot of comic book people are now doing light novels, yeah, which is popular in Japan and Korea and Southeast Asia, where it's like script but also then comic.
Right. I found this question interesting. What does your family think about your books or your stories, your novels?
Oh, I showed my father-in-law how much I had saved for retirement, and he finally hugged me for the first time in 15 years. So like I was very surprised, but also I think he finally was like, oh, you make actual real money, and like you're going to take care of my daughter in retirement. And my wife I have told my wife many times that I should just go get a job, and she'd be like, and she said, you would be miserable doing that. I would rather you just not do that and not be miserable your whole life. And I was like, okay. And like every time we had like problems financially, I always was like, maybe I should just go back to working. And she's like, she always told me no. My mom and dad were always very supportive, saying, I mean, what happened is I had a rule. where I could do any stupid thing I wanted as long as it wasn't illegal until I hit 30. If I hit 30 and I was not there, I had to go get a real job. And so that was the deadline I put myself. And when I turned 30, I had not made it. And I started working in sales and marketing. And let me tell you, I know everyone hates doing sales. Sales is great because you always have a job. Like if you learn how to sell your books, you'll be able to sell. Books is easily the hardest thing you will ever have to sell. It is the absolute worst business to get into. And so if you can sell that to people and make a decent living, like you can go and sell and market anything. Like I also build websites. I also run book marketing for authors. I also teach. I have a training academy with my business partner, Monica Leonel. So like I've also just gotten into a lot of other stuff. And I always tell people that if you're going to be a creative, like there's no just doing the one thing. Like every creative I know is the combination of 10 or 15 revenue streams that includes maybe teaching or doing courses or speaking at conventions and doing Etsy and having a Patreon and all of these things and having them mold together. But my family has been very supportive. My mother-in-law has been very supportive. My father-in-law has just been silent. So it's been quite an evolution, especially now that I'm on a little bit more stable footing, that I can have those conversations with people, but it took forever.
Yeah, and parents tend to want you to have an easy life, and being a creator is not necessarily that, at least not initially. Like it's a struggle. Was there somebody that helped you get to where you are? Someone that helped you be successful, maybe from your wife?
I can't say there was one specific person. What I think the best thing that I never had a mentor or someone who was bringing me up. What I did have, and what I think is the best advice, is to like find other artists who like do work that you admire, that are at your level, that you like can hang out with, because they're going to be the ones that like raise you up as you and level you up. And all my entire career, as I've grown, like other people have helped me get to the next level, but they've always been people in my friend group or in my creator network. You know, once you are like making something that's really cool, if you surround yourself with other people, and I'm not saying like do this a mercenary, like as a mercenary, just like you are going to find people who you think make cool work, and hopefully they think you make cool work. And just by being a creator, by being able to make something of a quality, it shows that you have done so much work that like you are in this very exclusive club of like people who would rather spend their free time making art than actually like, I don't know, going out to bars or like doing other stuff or going to sporting events. And that tends to, especially when you get to the level where like your books are saleable, like people will actually buy them and not out of pity. People will respond to your work, and other people that are in the creative community will respond to it as well. And so a lot of people that are young are like try to befriend me, and I'm like, we are 8 generations away from each other, and like you're really cool, and like we can like I grok the thing that you're doing, but just like I am saying words like grok, which I doubt anyone in this room except maybe Chris knows what that's from. I always say, like, you should spend your energy making art and then finding other people of your age group and in your same level that are on the come up as well, because they are going to do way more for your career than I ever will.
Yeah, I think there's a community aspect to a lot of it, and I'm sure you come across like some negativity as well with certain creators for one reason or another, whether they're jealous or they're territorial or competitive.
Sure. I mean, it's high school. It's high school, well, yeah. But you're an adult.
Right, so. Right. But I've learned so much myself from the other people that are doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing, that are maybe a year or two or 5 years ahead of where I am in my process.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you have these people that you meet at. I grew up in conventions. Chris also is where I met Chris at conventions, and so like you meet these people, and then like you just keep seeing them over and over and over again, and you're like, wow, you didn't give up. That's pretty cool. Like I didn't give up either, and like sometimes it's really surprising. I'm like, wow, you didn't give up, but your books were so bad and now they're really good. And some people you're like, wow, whatever happened to that person? Because like they had it, I thought they had it all, and like they're just gone now.
Yeah.
But then you see people that like just branch out and do wildly different things than you ever imagine. Like, you know, I have a friend who has like a like Patreon that does really well, and other people that like build course sites, and like other people who start publishing other people's work. And you come back to these people like again and again, and you're like, wow, you're still doing that. And that's the next level of like, wow, I now have like a deep respect for you not giving up, because by all accounts you should have. We all should have.
Right. And I think that's it. And I say this all the time. The people who are successful are not always the people who are the most talented. Some of the most talented people I know don't ever get anything done. They never put anything out.
Yeah, and it's also, there's a focused intention behind things that I think most people miss. It's like, it's not just doing your 10,000 hours or getting your 1,000 true fans. It's like intentionally figuring out what it is about your work that is lacking, and then working to improve it to be a better person and a better creator and have a better mindset and be gentler and kinder and be able. I see all of these people who really want a big audience, but like they're just not ready. Like either their verbiage online isn't good, or like they just don't have that piece to connect, or like they're lacking very much in a fundamental piece of what it means to like get someone to connect with your work. So Camry's probably going to kill me if she ever sees this, but Black Market Heroine, which is a book that I just released last year, I was following that artist for years, being like, wow, this is a really interesting style, and then being like, not quite. Like, she needs to really work on this. I'm like, I hope if she just did this. And then finally one day I saw a piece she did, and I was like, she's ready. And I literally messaged her that day and was like, hey, I want to do a book with you. The minute that I saw they were ready. And there are people that are lurking on your pages that like are that kind of, hopefully not your pages, but like when you are a professional creator that are like waiting to see if you take that next step. And I get messages all the time like, wow, I've been following your career for 10 years. Or like, I remember when you made this post in this forum. And I was like, really? We weren't even friends back then. How did you remember that? And that stuff will happen all of the time. And I have examples of like, I was really bad at writing romance. So I decided to write this book, Invasion, that was about a romance that was like focused on romance. And I didn't think I was great at writing YA. So I wrote this book, marked ones, before I started writing The Sleeping Beauty. And I wrote like, so certain of these books, I was like, I'm really bad at doing this thing. I was really bad at writing non-punchy kicky characters, like not characters who are like fight first. So I wrote this book, Dragon Scourge, this series, and it was like, I wonder if I can write a character who never throws a punch and only writes through diplomacy. It was hard. It was so hard to do this series. But like, all of it made this series, the Obsidian Spindle Saga, better than, and the following books of the Godsverse Chronicles better, because I was able to bring in more, because I saw a fault in my work and I like specifically and intentionally went to fix that.
This question made me laugh, and I'm curious what your take is. I don't think it was aimed at you. I think it's just kind of a general thing. But would you say a big ego will help or hurt an author? It kind of caught me off guard when I saw it. I'm like, that's kind of a good question.
Yeah, because it's both. Like, it's having confidence in your work and putting it out there, but being humble enough to know that like any person who responds to it is treasure, because most people will not. You know, people look at my career and I'm like, I have 175,000 people that I've unsubscribed from my mailing list over the last few years. Like, I've had 10,000 people say no to me. Every time I launch a book, even if it goes well, I get maybe 1% of the people on my mailing list to engage with it at any one time. And it's a different one depending on the book and depending on what I've done. But like, it's such a small amount of people who actually care that you have to be very, very, very humble about that. However, like, these are words that came out of my brain and I'm telling you they are great. On some level, like, you have to have some confidence in like the fact that they are great. But you also have to be humble enough to know that like maybe this is as good as I can do now, but I can do a lot better. And what I find a lot with artists and writers is their ego. They have this big ego, but like their work isn't there yet. So when somebody punctures their bubble, they're like, wait, I've developed my entire personality around the fact that my art is good. And you're telling me my art is not good, so now I'm never going to do anything again. Yeah. And you really need both, because like, I have to hire somebody and convince them to spend a year of their life writing my book, which is a year of their life they're never going to get back, or edit my book, or like whatever. So, and like, even when it's nonfiction, on some level, nonfiction is even harder, because you're like, these are ideas that I believe you should implement. And like, it's not just the thing that I believe. It's like, now I'm saying this is good advice you should do. And that makes it even more, like, you have to have a confidence in that, because then if you don't have a confidence, people are going to be like, should I though? I don't, like, you don't even seem to believe your own words. And so you have to have that, but you also have to have that humbleness to know that like, you're always going to improve. But I still go back and I read my own books. I think they're really good. I just listened to all 12 of the Godsverse Chronicles, and I told my friend multiple times, I can't believe how good this series is.
I mean, you have to have a little bit of that ego, because that, for me, keeps you creating. If you think your stuff is terrible, why would you continue to put it out?
Yeah, and also, like, it's insulting to the people who actually love your work if you think your work is terrible. Or someone told me, because I used to berate my own work, and someone one time messaged me and said, like, I wish you would stop doing that. It's really insulting. And I was like, to who? Like, to me? Like, I can insult myself. He's like, no, because I like your work and you're saying it's bad. And that means that my taste is bad. And if there's one thing I want you to remember about me, my taste is good. So you should stop doing that. There are aspects of a lot of my books that I think can be much better, especially the ones that I drew. But there's a lot of people that love that work. And like, that is the gift of like creation, that you can find someone to resonate on the same frequency of weird as you.
Yeah, I continually, and I've told you this many times, that I absolutely hate my first comic. I hate it. And I've redrawn it 3 times. And I'm getting ready to redraw it again when we go to print again, because I've gotten so much better since then. But every single convention, I get a dozen people at least that go, wow, I really like this art style. I'm like, I can't help but think, like, what's wrong with you? But, you know, something you do is going to click with someone. It may not click with everyone, but you might find those people. And that's the key, is finding those people that like what you do.
Sure. And like, I think the art on Unordinary is horrible, but I also love it at the same time. And like, it's possible to hold both of those things in your brain. Like, I love Unordinary, but I also think it is like not very good, but I love it. But so again, you have to have those two things able to coexist, and know that like, I thought this was good enough to put out in the world, and like, I just have to understand that it's not mine anymore. Yeah. Like, everyone is going to have it. Everyone who comes in contact with that piece of art is going to have a different thing that they imprint on, and it's really important that I don't take that away from them.
I think that's probably one of the smartest things I've heard somebody say about creating something and putting it out to an audience. Like, it's one thing to do it for yourself, But as soon as you give it to other people, or other people, get to enjoy it, you have to understand that it doesn't belong to you. I mean, you have the copyright on it, but it's now a shared thing. This question I thought was interesting too. Do you feel that your books have an impact on people's lives? And if so, what kind of impact do they have?
I mean, I know they do because people tell me all of the time. Like my nonfiction, no question does, because people have run successful campaigns or like have told me that like it's their favorite book about creation or something like that, or you can look at reviews. But like just objectively, so many people have reached out to me in my life to tell me that something, often things that I never even continued, like Paradise, meant so much to them, or that I'm their favorite writer because of this series, or one of my books is their favorite book or series of all time. And so I don't know, like objectively, I just think I'm some guy like sitting in a behind a computer typing things, but like also objectively, like I have an entire folder somewhere on this desk of all of the nice notes that I've gotten from people over the years, both in person, people handing them to me, or mailing them to me, or just sending an email. So yes, but there's another part of this where a lot of people have told me that they resonate with the fact that I just am still there.
Yeah.
And by the simple way you conduct yourself, you will, like, one time somebody told me that the fact that I was open about being on antidepressants got her on antidepressants. And I was like, oh, well, like life purpose completely done. Like everything else I've ever done in my life is just bonus time from that. Like, cause it changed one person's life. And I've helped a lot more than that. But I always go back to like, sometimes just the way you live your life is like going to affect people positively or negatively, because you're also going to be the villain in some people's story. Like that's the crazy thing no one talks about. Like I listen to that song by Lucy Silva's Villain like 10 times a week, because I know that every action I take is going to affect people positively. And even though it is my best intention to do good in the world, it will affect some people negatively. And the more impact you have, the more that will ripple out.
What's your favorite part of the job?
Okay.
They came up with some good ones.
The part that I love the most is you're standing at a convention. Somebody has never heard your book, anything about your book, and they look at your book and you give them the pitch and their eyes light up. Like that's the best part, followed very closely by someone saying, I just finished your book and it was wonderful. The rest of it is taking the things in my head that won't stop yelling at me and getting them to shut up because the book is done.
Yeah. Yeah, I had I had one of those moments this last weekend in Seattle where we have, in each city, we have like one or two super fans. And it was one of those rare planets aligned kind of thing where they showed up at the table at the same time. And we just kind of sat back and watched them totally geek out about our latest issues.
Like, oh yeah, I've had people pull their friend over and said, buy these 3 books right now.
Oh yeah, all the time.
It's really interesting because in the past year, a lot more I've been working with a lot of authors to run Kickstarter campaigns, and watching this sort of movement grow of like people embracing crowdfunding because of the work that I've done is something I've never started a movement before. Like no one, like a couple of people here and there, sure, like to have my fans, but like to watch an entire industry like turn because of, in no small part because of the work Monica and I have done with it, is pretty incredible also.
I mean, it makes it possible. Like, because who has 10 grand or more to dump into making books?
Sure.
It has changed the industry forever, I think. There are no more gatekeepers. You can be successful without having to wait on somebody else.
Sure. That's absolutely true.
So that brings me to another good question. Where did you learn all these marketing techniques?
I worked at Aflac first. So I okay, so I had four companies fail by the time I was like 32 or something like that. And like when one company fails, it's like a fluke. When two, you may be able to blame your partner, but like when it's four, like something was broken. And I realized that thing was just like I expected things to sell themselves. And so I started doing sales, and I could get 0 jobs at the beginning, but I started working for Aflac, and then I worked for this place called Recycler, which maybe you guys know the Recycler. It's like some magazine. I don't even know. I've never even seen it.
Craigslist, but in print.
Yes, it probably doesn't exist anymore, frankly.
No, it doesn't.
Like,
it might be a website, but it's
yeah,
irrelevant.
And then I got a job at Sprint. I don't know if any of y'all have Sprint, but like I don't think it's casting aspersions to say they're not the best of all of the cell phone companies. And I don't even know if I don't know, maybe they're all T-Mobile now, like but regardless, like learning how to maneuver a conversation so that people understand the value proposition of a subpar product was like really, once I could do that, I was like, oh, I'm selling a much superior product than whatever this is. But and it's a product. So it was just taking all of those things of like, this is a product. I used to work at Levi. So like Levi is just selling a jean. Here, I sell you jeans. Like there's not much difference between selling a pair of jeans and selling a book. It's just like the fungibility of like the product is slightly different depending on the industry. But the more you can understand that like marketing drives down the cost of sales, and then sales are the action that you take to like actually make money, the better it will be. So the only thing that like Levi has that like John's Jean doesn't, assuming they're both quality products, is like the 150 years that they've been on the market and all of the marketing that they've done and the brand recognition. I talked to somebody at Mercedes once, a director at Mercedes, because my big job at Recycler was selling car dealerships, and he said, our time horizon is 30 years. I have to start when someone is born so that by the time they're 30 or 35, they will buy a Mercedes product. So like, I don't care what happens today. I care what happens. I don't even care what happens in the next decade. I just need them to eventually make that decision and fill that pipeline. And hearing all of these business people talk about marketing really helped. But also just understanding that what you're really doing with sales is trying to find a person who has a problem and like solve it with a thing. And whether that is a book about Kickstarter, or they really like are looking for a really cool like post-apocalyptic comic, or they're looking for something like whatever it is, like it's just putting that in front of people and then realizing that there are 8 billion people in this world, and I don't think it's possible to not find 1,000 people that resonate with the thing that you do. I just don't. You have to really try to not find those people, and by really try, I mean like you have to not try. Like if you do the marketing actions for long enough, it will come back because you will get better and you will improve to the point that there was a moment when I was working at Sprint that like it clicked, and I stopped being a like subpar or like barely getting by salesperson, and I just learned how to turn a conversation. Like I just like it was like learning little bits, but eventually it clicked. And it took like 6 months, and I swear I almost lost that job every single month that I had it. But eventually I was on a call and just it all clicked together because I was doing the repetitive actions that were necessary. And most people don't want to do those repetitive actions. So if you just do them and you do them with intention, it turns out like you can get way far ahead. Like everyone in this room probably wants to be an animator. Everyone in my school wanted to direct movies. Of all of the people that graduated my class, I think I'm the only person who's ever directed a movie. Even though in high school, everyone was going to be an actor. Everyone was going to do this thing. And the only difference between me and them, because I was not the most talented person in my high school, was that I didn't know. I didn't realize that like people didn't just follow their dreams. Like it just wasn't a thing that I literally ever thought. And when I just kept going, and people would be like, wow, you're still here? Okay, like maybe I'll give you this hint. Maybe I'll give you this tip because like you're doing all of the things that we say to do. When I started doing shows, I would pepper my friends with questions like, how did it go? Like, what was the biggest thing? Like, what's the biggest unlock? And someone once told me, always speak at a convention. Don't do a convention unless you can speak, because when you speak at a convention, the organizer is signing off that you are worthy and that they approve of you. And he gets you in a room with a small group of people. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. And I did it. And it worked so well. And that same person came back weeks later and was like, or maybe years later, and was like, you're the only person out of the 1,000 people I talked to do that thing. And I was like, I don't know. You are successful. You told me what to do. And I just did it until it worked.
That's huge. So what of your work, which one are you most proud of? And is that the one that's most successful?
Which, it's hard because I'm most proud of the fact that I'm still doing it. Singularly, my favorite book is the one my dad loved the most, called Worst Thing in the Universe. It is absolutely my least successful book.
Right.
The most successful book is probably the God's Verse Chronicles, or Ichabod, and I am very proud of them. But they are, if I had to pick one book that was like, if you like this, you're going to like the rest of the work that I do, the fiction work, it would be that one. Okay. That one, or Anna in the Dark Place, which is also very unsuccessful.
Isn't that crazy? How the stuff that you are most proud of or you like the most is oftentimes not the thing that people will resonate with.
No, I think that's actually probably accurate, because when you're doing something for yourself, you are imprinting all of the things that make it less marketable. So, Worst Thing in the Universe is narrated by God. That makes it way less popular. Set in the distant future. So now it's only sci-fi people that want a book about a satire about religion. And then like it's about karma, so two things about religion. And like it's a meditation on like reincarnation. Like it's just so many things that like I love, but like you've got to be one of like 30 people in the world who like, and everyone who reads that book says it's their favorite book that I've ever written. But like you have to like the cross-sectionality of it. Whereas like Katrina, when we did Katrina Hates the Dead, it was about a girl who gets sick of living during the apocalypse and she sets out to hell to kill the devil. Like, do you like attractive girls killing monsters? Do you like fast-paced action? Do you like beautiful art? Then you're probably going to like it. Like, it was so mass market that, like, even now it sells. Like, even now today it sells almost at the same level, well, if I push it, than the rest of my work. And, like, whereas Ichabod is about a psychopath, it's very bloody. It's in a weird art style that not everyone likes. Like, there's so many things that, like, it's only because of the Cthulhu book that Ichabod was able to survive for so long, because where the further you get away from the mass market, the less likely your book is to be able to sell at a convention. We were just talking about that like recently.
Right. So, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to give these guys a chance if they had any new questions that they thought of before I kind of do my last couple. Did you guys have something that you were wondering or you wanted to ask? Yeah.
What's the next project you want to work on?
I don't know if you heard of. What's the next thing?
So it's hard. Like, being a professional is hard because the things that are coming out are not the things that I'm working on, and there's usually a 2-year gap. So the next thing that I'm releasing is a company did this card game that's coming to Kickstarter in a couple of weeks for Ichabod, Jones Monster Hunter. So this company, Rendenspiel, is doing this card game, and they've been working on it for about 3 years, and we're really excited. I'm on sabbatical now because I've written 41 novels. And so the next book that I'm working on, that I'm doing the outline for right now, is going to take my two biggest series and a couple of other ancillary projects and merged them all into one universe. It's called Eternity. It's the 12th book in my Godsverse Chronicles and the 13th book in my Obsidian Spindle Saga universe, which are my biggest universes. So that's the next project that I'm working on. But I also have comics that I'm working on and anthologies that I'm in. It's never like one thing. But this morning, I was working on that outline. So I guess that's the next thing. But I have like 12 books launching this year still.
Oh, hold on. That's my alarm. Turn that off. So we are basically out of time, but I wanted to thank you for everything, for slinging some books these guys' way. I don't know if that was terrible grammar or what. And taking the time, because I know you're super busy with stuff.
Ooh, sure.
All right, back there? All right. I don't know what happened. But anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And if I have a podcast called Kickstart Your Book Sales, and you can find me online. I don't know if it's appropriate. Chris can give you my email. You can email me questions. Like, just do the work. That's the biggest thing.
All right. Thank you so much, Russell.